What you're about to hear is not a drill, not a simulation, and not a hypothetical scenario played out in some Washington think tank. What is unfolding right now, across the skies above Tel Aviv, in the narrow blue waters of the Strait of Hormuz, in the rubble-strewn streets of Tehran, and along the volatile border between Israel and Lebanon, is a military operation of historic proportions. The United States of America, the State of Israel, have launched a coordinated, sustained, and devastatingly precise campaign against the Islamic Republic of Iran and its regional proxy forces, and the consequences of this operation will reshape the geopolitical landscape of the entire Middle East for years, perhaps decades to come. Air raid sirens pierced the night air over Tel Aviv in the early morning hours this week. Residents jolted awake, grabbed their children, and rushed into bomb shelters as the dark sky above lit up with the brilliant, terrifying light of interceptor missiles meeting incoming projectiles mid-flight. It was another sleepless night in one of the world's most watched cities, a city that has become a live laboratory of modern warfare, where cutting-edge missile defense systems are tested not in controlled environments, but against real weapons carrying real warheads launched by an adversary that has openly declared its desire to see Israel cease to exist. But this week is different. This week, Israel and the United States are not just defending. They are attacking, and the results are being felt from the Persian Gulf all the way to the streets of downtown Tehran. Welcome. Tonight, we take you inside Operation Epic Fury, the American and Israeli joint military campaign striking at the very heart of the Iranian regime's military machine. We will walk you through what has happened, who gave the orders, what has been destroyed, and what the coming days may bring to one of the most dangerous regions on the planet. The headline, stated plainly, is this: the United States military's Central Command, known as CENTCOM, has confirmed the destruction of 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels operating in the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow and strategically indispensable waterway through which approximately one-fifth of the world's entire oil supply flows each and every day. These were not simply patrol boats. These were purpose-built vessels designed to deploy underwater naval mines, cheap, durable, and extraordinarily deadly weapons, into one of the most trafficked shipping lanes on Earth. Their objective, had they been allowed to complete their mission, would have been to blockade the strait, cut off global oil supplies, damage commercial tankers, and hand Tehran enormous economic leverage over the rest of the world. That objective has been denied. President Donald Trump, responding to reports of Iranian mine-laying activity, issued a stark and unambiguous public warning. The president stated that if mines were placed in the Strait of Hormuz and not removed immediately, the word he used was forthwith, then the military consequences to Iran would be, in his words, at a level never seen before. Within hours of that warning, CENTCOM operationalized it. 16 mine-laying vessels were destroyed. The message from Washington could not have been clearer. But the destruction of those vessels is only one chapter in a far larger story. According to CENTCOM's official figures, 50 Iranian Navy vessels have now been destroyed in the course of this operation, a number so significant that military analysts have described Iran's naval combat capability as effectively rendered non-functional. The Iranian Navy, once a source of considerable regional intimidation, has been, for all practical purposes, dismantled. CENTCOM also confirmed that 140 United States service members have sustained injuries during the operation, a sobering reminder that behind every military briefing, there are real men and women putting their lives on the line. Of those 140 injured, 8 have been classified as seriously injured. From his position in Tel Aviv, Fox News chief foreign correspondent Trey Yingst reported through the night as sirens wailed and interceptors lit up the sky above him. Yingst confirmed that Israeli and American forces have been conducting sustained strikes targeting not just Iranian military infrastructure, but also the command and control apparatus that allows Tehran to direct its proxy forces across the region. Strikes have been confirmed in and around Tehran itself, as well as in other regions of the country, in what military officials describe as a concerted, deliberate effort to degrade Iran's ability to project force. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke publicly about the operation's objectives. In remarks broadcast widely, Netanyahu stated directly, "We are in a campaign against a cruel enemy that wants to destroy us. We crushed their nuclear and ballistic capabilities in Operation Rising Lion. Instead of learning the lesson, they buried them underground so we could not target them." Those words carry enormous weight. A direct acknowledgement that this operation began not as a spontaneous military action, but as a deliberate strategic response to Iran's calculated concealment of ballistic missile infrastructure deep underground. The concealment failed. The strikes found their targets. The operation is not limited to strikes inside Iran. Israel has simultaneously intensified its campaign against Hezbollah, the Iran-backed militant organization in Lebanon that has spent decades accumulating one of the largest non-state missile arsenals in world history. A top IDF spokesperson confirmed that Hezbollah has been attempting to increase the volume and range of its rocket fire toward Israeli civilian communities in the north of the country, and that Israeli military pressure on Hezbollah is deepening with each passing day. In a development underscoring how seriously Israel views the northern front, the IDF confirmed the repositioning of the elite Golani Brigade from the Gaza border region to the northern border adjacent to Lebanon. These are battle-hardened soldiers who served as the tip of the spear in the ground campaign inside Gaza, trained fighters with tanks already deployed in southern Lebanon. Over the weekend, 2 Israeli soldiers were killed by Hezbollah in that region, a reminder of the lethal cost being paid along that front even now. Retired 4-star General Jack Keane offered an assessment of the operation's progress that stopped analysts in their tracks. Speaking about the systematic targeting of Iranian offensive capabilities, General Keane described the approach as deliberate and precise, targeting not just launchers, but the transportation networks that move them, the underground storage sites, and the command and control infrastructure. He then offered the number that defines the scope of what has been achieved. Iran's offensive capability, he indicated, has been reduced by approximately 90%. 90%. That is not a setback for the Iranian regime. That is a fundamental transformation of the regional military balance. To understand how we arrived at this moment, it is essential to examine the deeper historical arc. The Islamic Republic of Iran, since its founding in the Revolution of 1979, has operated according to an ideological framework explicitly calling for the elimination of the State of Israel and the expulsion of American influence from the Middle East. The catastrophic Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s forced Tehran to abandon conventional military ambitions and instead invest in what analysts now call the Axis of Resistance, a network of proxy forces stretching from Lebanon through Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Hezbollah was created by Iran in the early 1980s, funded and armed by the IRGC, and transformed over 4 decades into what independent analysts describe as the most heavily armed non-state actor in the world. Hamas maintains its own relationship with Tehran, as do the Houthi movement in Yemen and various Iraqi militia groups. Iran's strategy has been to surround Israel and American interests with a ring of armed proxies, absorbing punishment while Iran avoids formal declarations of war. Operation Epic Fury is a direct assault on the infrastructure that makes that strategy possible. The Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, now find themselves in an unprecedented situation. These are countries that have maintained official neutrality in regional conflicts for decades, while quietly deepening economic and security relationships with both Washington and, through the Abraham Accords, with Israel. They are now experiencing something they have never experienced before: sustained drone and ballistic missile attacks against their territory and their populations. Doha, Abu Dhabi, and Dubai, global hubs for finance and tourism where tens of thousands of American citizens live and work, have been targeted. Correspondent Yingst reported that active conversations are underway with Gulf state sources about potential military involvement, not merely defensive, but possibly offensive. If that threshold is crossed, it would represent a geopolitical earthquake, shattering the regional order that has existed since 1979 and marking the formation of an entirely new Middle Eastern security architecture. On the humanitarian side, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Assistant Secretary of State Dylan Johnson led a significant and largely unreported effort to evacuate tens of thousands of American citizens from the Middle East in the early days of the operation. Using charter flights, ground transportation, and coordination with regional governments, the State Department moved Americans out of harm's way, out of the UAE, Qatar, and other Gulf states, at no cost to those individuals once they reached the United States. It was a logistical achievement that deserves recognition even as it has been overshadowed by the military dimensions of the story. Inside Iran, pro-regime demonstrations have been organized in Tehran and other cities, but what is not visible in those images is equally significant: anti-regime demonstrators. Iranian security forces have issued explicit warnings that protesters will be treated as enemies of the state, and the regime's willingness to use lethal force against its own people has been demonstrated in devastating fashion, with an estimated 32,000 people killed during protest crackdowns earlier this year alone. And yet, Prime Minister Netanyahu's public call for the Iranian people to free yourselves was not empty rhetoric. It was a specific message implying active work behind the scenes to support Iranian civil society. Yingst confirmed that key IRGC figures responsible for organizing crackdowns on protesters have been specifically targeted and eliminated in this operation, and that IRGC headquarters in Tehran have been destroyed. The architecture of repression has been damaged, and whether that damage proves sufficient to change conditions on the ground inside Iran remains the central unanswered question of this entire campaign. Looking ahead, several variables will define how this situation evolves. Gulf state military involvement remains the single most consequential near-term uncertainty. Conversations are happening, the conditions for escalation exist, and the entry of Arab nations into active operations would rewrite the regional map entirely. Iran's remaining small boat fleet, 80% of which is still operational according to CENTCOM, along with a reported stockpile of between 2,000 and 5,000 naval mines, means the threat to the Strait of Hormuz is not fully neutralized. The establishment of a convoy escort system for oil tankers would be a critical next step for stabilizing global energy markets. Meanwhile, at the Iran-Armenia border, reporter Steve Harrigan noted that only a trickle of people, 2 or 3 per day, are currently crossing out of Iran, though that could change rapidly as conditions evolve inside the country. As we bring this report to a close, the weight of what has occurred this week demands a moment of full reckoning. 50 Iranian naval vessels destroyed, 16 mine-laying ships eliminated before they could blockade one of the world's most vital waterways, Iran's offensive capability reduced by 90%, 140 American service members injured in defense of regional stability and freedom of navigation, the Golani Brigade repositioned for potential operations in Lebanon, the IRGC headquarters in Tehran struck and damaged, tens of thousands of American civilians evacuated safely from the region, and inside Iran, a population long silenced by fear, watching, waiting, and receiving a message from Jerusalem that the moment to act may be approaching. This is a story about military operations, yes, but it is also a story about the limits of decades of Iranian strategic miscalculation, the courage of soldiers and journalists operating under genuine fire, and the extraordinary complexity of a region where history, religion, oil, and geopolitics converge in ways that defy easy answers. We will continue to bring you accurate, comprehensive coverage as the situation develops. The stakes for Israel, for Iran, for the Gulf states, for the global economy, and for the United States could not be higher. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we will see you at the next update.